Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another 3D Total interview. Today, I have the amazing and phenomenal Tungwei, mostly known as Guwei online on Instagram, Patreon. You've probably heard of him and his amazing illustrations. Today, we're going to be discussing about his brand new book with 3D Total, The World of Guweiz. So, thank you so much, Guweiz, for being here today and taking your time off to have this interview.
Thank you, Neddy, for having me.
Definitely. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I haven't told you this yet, but I actually backed your first campaign on Kickstarter. That was like my third campaign I ever backed. I was so hyped and gassed when they announced your book. I was so excited, and I got my hands on that book. I was among the very first people who supported that campaign. So
Oh,
yeah, just
wow.
wanted to let you
Yeah,
know.
thank you so much. Thank you so
Definitely.
much. The
So
first campaign was definitely a moment for me as well. So I really appreciate that you supported it.
definitely. The book was so impactful. I loved how you shared your journey and your workflow. It had so much information. Could you tell us what can we expect from the second book? You know, you had your first book and now you're coming out with your second book. What can we expect from this new book?
So, as with the first book, I want to make sure that this second book is also something of value as well, which means I want to not only show people the artworks that I've created in the past, 2 or so years, but also to again try my best to tell people my story, what's going on with the art, how I approach the art in both a technical sense and more of like a natural, human, organic sense, right? Like how I feel
Yeah.
about it, as well as how to approach it in terms of like lighting,
Wow.
composition. So it's like kind of a mix of both. And for this book, we are focused on the narrative side of things, right? Not so much just the illustration, but also try my very best to tell stories with my art.
Wow.
So that is kind of, I would say, really summarizes what I hope to achieve with this book, right? That's why it's also called The World of Guweiz. It sounds a little bit presumptuous of me to claim that I have a
No.
world ready to go. I feel there's still work to do, of course, but I think it's a good start, right? So I want the title to kind of reflect that a little bit.
No, definitely, I agree, and it's not at all. I think the world of Guweiz is a perfect title because when I look at your art, I feel this sense of like mood, atmosphere, story. It looks like these characters actually exist in their own universe and in their own world. So I think the world of Guweiz is a perfect name for the book because like it just embodies like your work gives a certain aesthetic, a certain mood that I think anyone who like spots a specific color palette or a specific theme kind of just immediately associates it with your art. So definitely, I think the world of Grace captures that so well.
Thank you very much. I think it's really just something that I enjoy doing, trying to create a more sort of comprehensive, complete story, right? Especially as I will mention in the book as well, right? Like how as I picked up more on the technical side of things, got a bit more familiar with drawing, I naturally wanted to explore more of the story side of things. So yeah, so this is kind of how the whole direction came about in the past 2 years.
That's really lovely to hear. I wanted to ask, like, we mentioned your work having such a in-depth story and mood and atmosphere. What are some of your inspirations, and how are you able to channel that inspiration into your art? Because I'm dying to know. Like, it's so unique and it has like this sense of story, mood. What inspires your arts?
That is a really good question. If I would say what inspired it, I would say almost really everything that I've gone through. Not to set things up to be very too dramatic, right? But I think as all artists, right, when we do something with our art, especially when we are honest with it and we put ourselves into it to try the best to create a result as interesting as we can make. I think a lot of times what really goes into it is what we've seen in terms of media as well in terms of live experience, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, so I would say what really inspires me, in a sense, is a lot of stories that I've read, both in book form as well, in written form, as well in like illustrated form, as well as films and games. It's a bit too many to list them all one by one, right? But I feel like the concept here is that with these media, I've always felt very impressed when I finish reading a story and say, wow, like even though there isn't anyone standing in front of me trying to tell me a story, verbally, making eye contact, all that, just by reading what they left behind or looking at what they drew, it can invoke such emotions. So I guess that is kind of the source of motivation for me to try and do the same myself. So that is the source of, I guess you could say, inspiration for what I do, right? I want to be able to use my art and present my thoughts in a way to make people feel, make people enjoy basically what I create.
Wow, that is so impactful. Definitely, I certainly agree. And you are clearly achieving that because artists all over the world are definitely inspired and they definitely feel that emotion, that story you're trying to convey in your artwork. So, yeah, you're doing a splendid job at that, if you ask me.
Thank
Definitely.
you very much. Of course, I still believe there's still a good way to go, right? But of course, as you said, I think I've had a decent start, and I think I'll just try my best to continue in this direction and see where I go.
Wow, we're excited to see where you go as well. So I wanted to ask, what are you most excited for in this art book? Some people might be looking forward to the tutorials, the explanations. In your first art book, I personally enjoyed your artistic journey. It's really insightful finding out how an artist, started off, and it was so wholesome yet very reassuring seeing your earlier works and seeing how you got from there to where you are now. It's very reassuring. But what are you most excited for in this new art book? Please tell us.
I guess in this art book, since I've been drawing this bad guy series in this
Oh,
kind
such a
of
splendid series, if you ask me. I
yeah,
love it.
thank you very much. I would say it's especially because it began more experimentally. Initially, when I did the first few drawings, I didn't have everything planned out. So the book is really the first time where all of it is put together. And I think what is really exciting for me, especially, is that I've actually taken about a month or so to go through almost every single artwork these past 2 years and then repaint and remaster a lot of them to kind of uh, up the visual standard per se, right? Because now that they're finally in one collection, I want them to, reach the fullest potential. So that's why I'm really excited for everyone to see, all the remastered artwork. Some less, some more, but that is really what I'm hyped for as well. To get to show that off.
Ooh, definitely. That sounds exciting. Yeah, it's really cool. How did you feel like reworking on some of those? Like probably seeing places that you made mistakes that you didn't notice back then, and you're like, oh, look at this. I did.
I think you got it exactly right. In fact, the whole thing started because I was gathering up the images, and then I was like, okay, this one looks pretty horrible. Let me fix that. And then, once you fix one, you can't really stop at one,
Yeah,
right?
you can't
You're
stop
like,
it. I
let's
know.
just gotta fix that one. And then, you just keep going. But I think it's good practice as well, right? Just to look back on it and have fun. Because when you draw a piece, you obviously want it to look the best it can look. Because after all, especially if you're trying to say tell a story, or even if you're just creating an illustration, you want it to look as good as it can, right? To your ability. Of course, it's not to say that you want to demand unachievable things too quickly of yourself, but we always want to try our best. So that's also the kind of spirit behind why I was compelled to kind of quote unquote bring a lot of the older artworks kind of up to standard, because I feel like it would be a waste to not kind of show them in their best form, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think everyone will also be looking forward to see the new remastered artwork and, see the difference between the artworks they once saw and loved, reworked and put with more and extra love, right?
Extra love and fixed up some mistakes.
Yes, yes, definitely. Okay.
But of course, just a small addition. Of course, the artworks in themselves are, of course, the kind of why an art book exists. But I'm just a small addition, but I also am excited for people to, or rather a little bit anxious for people to kind of read what I say about time management and all that, because I'm sharing some of these things quite honestly, and you know they can be a challenge, right? So I'll have also shared that in the book, and then I hope people can read it and then kind of digest it, right, for themselves and see what is useful and helpful for them. Yeah.
Wow, time management. I would really love to read that chapter. I'm sure people out there like me definitely would appreciate a chapter like that. So thank you for including such, because I am horrible with time management.
I'm also learning as well, right? Which is why it's kind of like a reflection, right? It's not so much like
Yes.
instructional.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's like authoritatively instructional. I would
Mm-hmm.
say it's kind of like a reflection for myself also, right? To kind of share my experience on what worked and what did not work for me. Yeah.
Definitely. We all learn from everyone's experience. I'm sure someone will be able to take something different and another one will take something different, but everyone will probably get something that can benefit them in one way from your experience. So thank you.
Yes, and that's what I hope the book can accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we have some fan picked questions that I would like to ask. Artists from all over the world, young, beginner, professional, they all admire your work. So we wanted to give them a chance to ask some questions. So yeah, we're gonna just run through some of them right now. The first question is about your national service. How has national service impacted your art? Are you able to keep up with creating art, or did you have to pause and take a break for the meantime?
So this is an interesting story. I believe I shared a little bit about it in the first book as well, but I'll take the chance to tell the story again, because I think it's a really, in a sense, a really surprising one to myself as well. So to quickly introduce, I'm from Singapore, and Singapore male citizens, we have national service, which is part of our obligation as a citizen. So we should start off by having these 2 years of full-time service, during which most of us are away for the weekdays, right? So it's kind of like a full-time job, but you stay at the office for the weekdays.
Oh, wow.
So that I think that's just kind of a simple way to put it.
Okay.
At that point in time, I wasn't really anywhere close to being a professional artist. I was really just very much a hobbyist, but I knew that art was something that I enjoyed doing, and I wanted to improve at it. Right? If just for the sake of getting better at doing this thing I enjoy. So with national service, one thing changed a lot from before, where I was in school. I think the equivalent for some overseas viewers, it's like the school you go to. It's like we call it junior college. It's about for kids when they are like 16 to 18. So during that period of time, I was drawing with pencils, just picking up drawing. So national service happened after that. So during that period, the surprising thing was that you know, since I was no longer a student for these 2 years, I had a lot of mental energy, right? Because as a student, you got to juggle all your subjects,
Yeah,
you got to
yeah.
do homework, exams. They're really a pain, to be
Okay.
honest. And even for those who love studying, right, you can't deny it's something that takes up
Exactly.
a good bit of your energy. So with national service, physically it's definitely more tiring and all that, but mentally, when I go home on weekends, I really just enjoyed drawing. Right, there wasn't a stress. There wasn't like a to put it a bit bluntly, right? There wasn't like an existential stress of studying, right? Like, oh, you got to get good grades. There wasn't any kind of stress like that, in a sense. So being free from that, national service was a period where even though I could only draw on weekends, I felt really free to enjoy this hobby and really to try improve at what I do. So I would say it was a period of time where I was actually able to spend a lot more
Wow.
quality and focused time on my art on weekends. So yeah, I think it surprised me as well, right? Because of course I didn't expect to be able to continue the hobby, through this pretty demanding period, but I was actually able to really spend that time well. Of course, as a bit of a bonus, there's like a gap before and after national service, because it's sandwiched between junior college and university. So these two gaps are also periods of time, months, right, where I was able to spend a lot of time on my art and really just do it full time, like completely, every day. So I would say it's a blessing in disguise in a sense for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
To wrap up, yeah. So because of all this time, I had time to, and I use the word time a lot, but it really is about the concept of spending your resource, focusing on what you love doing, and then using that, I was able to grow my skill over this period, and then jump forward to university. I was at a point where I could do some work professionally at perhaps a more of an entry level or more or medium level, and then that's where I've transitioned to doing art full time and took the plunge. So that's kind of the story about national service. It was actually a blessing in disguise.
Definitely, it was. That was so interesting to hear because, some artists work differently. Some artists might not be able to function under stress, but you were able to find a way to, make you work. In fact, like you said, make you work to your benefits. Wow, that's really interesting to know.
And yeah, thank you. And I think it was actually more like I mentioned, the lack of stress, because school was more stressful than national service. So that could be an interesting way to look at it. And also as well, I think that time, because during that period, because I was more of a beginner artist, I didn't have any expectations, right? It was
Okay.
kind of like, yeah, let's just have
Yeah.
fun, hey, look, it's more time drawing without the stress of exams, let's just enjoy it. So that kind of mindset also helped a lot. And of course, in a sense, right, having been doing this for longer, there's kind of like how do I put it, a career side to it now, right? Whether it's for good or for bad, there is this side to it that I think didn't exist back then. So that really
Yeah.
helped create a stress-free environment where I could just make use of these small scraps of time, but use them very efficiently while enjoying it as well.
Yeah, definitely. That was very insightful. Though it got me thinking, have you ever actually gone through periods of time where you had to pause or maybe you didn't feel like drawing? And if you did, how were you able to pull yourself back into the flow of creating arts?
So I would say, as you said, there are definitely obstacles that can come up in life, right? Sometimes, a loved one gets ill, you need to take care of them or spend more time with them, or there are other commitments in life, right? These kind of things are to be expected. Although I must say I was fortunate enough to never really experience a period where I didn't want to draw. So, so far that has been something that I find, quite lucky for myself. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah, but well, I would say when sometimes you face a period where you can't draw, right? Of course, we get a bit rusty. It's like athletes as well, right? You take them a couple of weeks off of practice, it kind of hurts the performance in a sense, both mentally and physically. So for drawing, I think the important thing that I slowly learned over the years is that your own mindset determines a lot. Because on one hand, right, you can fret over it, like, oh no, like I need to draw today, I can't do this, and then be upset, and then you sort of almost hurt yourself just by doing that, right? You obsess over something that you don't really have control over. So for myself now, whenever I encounter that, I try to take it in a more positive way rather than looking at time off being something that is horrible or something that is like, I don't let it like really dwell on me. I don't let it kind of depress me so much, in a sense, affect me. I just try to enjoy the time away doing what I do, because as a addition to national service of 2 years, right, we actually have a continued reservist every year as well, even though it's only for a couple of weeks. So I just had the reservist period, and I think right after I finished writing the bulk of the book this year. So it was a double whammy in a sense, preparing for the book and then
Yeah.
going for that, and then, so very little time to draw new artwork. Especially with how I just mentioned, I spent 1 month remastering the old stuff
The
as
old
well.
stuff, yes.
Yeah, so I would say it was definitely tough, right? Because you can't do what you want to do, and when you love doing it so much, it's annoying in a sense, right? It's not something that is pleasant. But again, right, I think the best way to manage it is just to enjoy what you have to do, and then when it's time to come back, just come back with a positive attitude and try your best to continue. I think that is my experience, right? From my perspective of someone who fortunately hasn't faced a lack of motivation, but sometimes face different things, right? That stops me from drawing. So in a sense, I don't have extensive personal experience on how to pull myself out of a motivational rut. But I do believe that in times of that, what could be also a good way to do it is to just enjoy some more media, movies, books, comics, manga. All these kind of things can be fun ways to spark your creativity again, and then that could be all you need to get back in the flow of things, right? So don't give up. If you want to draw, I think you will definitely find a way, right? I think that's all I really wanted to say.
Oh no, thank you so much. Yes, I do agree. Like as artists, even though we go through like period of time, I think the spark within us will still draw us back to the desk to draw, regardless of like how long like we feel like in a slump. If we as artists, we just it's just like a natural calling. We just want to make art. So yes, definitely I agree. I 100% agree with you. Okay, some people are asking how much time do you put into creating each artwork? That's something I would also like to know. Your artwork is so
Uh,
detailed, and like I'm sure it varies between art piece, but usually, what's like an average? How much time do you spend? Like, do it like in one sitting or like different sittings, different days?
so usually, recently I've been, creating a more narrative-based kind of illustrations, which come in sets of like 4 to 5, mostly
Mm.
four. So for these, I start them all at the same time. So they usually finish within 1 or 2 days of each other, and the whole process will take about 1 to 2 weeks. And the tough part about this one, right? Just this specific, excuse me, specific style of illustration or workflow is that uh, it it can bounce off each other in a good way and a bad way. In a good way because you gain momentum. You're like, okay, the first one looks good. It flows nicely into the second one. But then when you encounter difficulties in like the third one, it's like, okay, maybe I need to relook my options in 1 and 2. So I would say overall, this is the kind of time frame I'm working with, 1 to 2 weeks for like a set of four. In terms of sittings, right now I'm doing this completely full time. So from morning to night, it's doing this, right? To kind of like break it down a little bit, most mornings I go for a short jog, and then whenever I'm tired, I just take a 30-minute nap. It's like the benefits of being self-employed, I guess. You can
Yes.
take a nap anytime you want, especially when it gets tiring, right? Sometimes, drawing, especially trying to solve problems, that can be kind of exhausting. So I manage my break times, and then the rest of it I mostly spend drawing. And of course, as I mentioned, right, or other life commitments as well. But after all, this is a full-time job for me in a sense. So I spend full days doing this, and it may be surprising, and this is not like a recommendation or a rule of thumb, but I also treat weekends like weekdays, right? I just draw on all days. I don't really stop. Yeah, so this is kind of how the workflow goes for me.
Oh wow, that's really cool to hear. Yeah, everyone has their own like way of like working and their own, especially like you said, you're self-employed, so you can make your own
Yeah, yeah,
time
yeah,
for whatever.
totally right.
Yeah, it's totally
Of course, there are
fine.
also like classic pitfalls because you find it hard to step away from the work. You're like, okay, if I could finish this artwork a bit earlier, maybe I can do a bit better. And all those kind of thoughts are kind of in a way comes with a package, right? It comes with the
Yes.
bonuses of being able to sleep whenever you want and all that. So like it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so some people like to know what has changed in your personal life and in your art without being too personal, I guess. Um,
Of course.
since your last book, what has changed so far?
I would say my personal life, honestly, nothing too exciting to report. But I think, in a sense, that because I'm constantly drawing and coming up with solutions to narrative problems, yeah, figuring out the technical side of things, I feel like in terms of my art perception, it has grown quite a bit over the past 2 years. So before that, around the time of the first book, and maybe even a little bit more before that, right? Most of my energy was basically dedicated to creating a picture that looks as good as it can look, right?
Okay.
I just wanted to create illustration where, okay, if I'm drawing like a witch character, I wanted the hat to look interesting. I wanted the pose to look interesting. I wanted the composition and the technical side of things to be nice so that it's attractive to viewers. And that was kind of the main objective in a sense. But as I did more of that, I still enjoy that, and I definitely mix some of it in now and then. As I do more of that and I get a bit more practice at it and more proficient, I felt like I could do a bit more, right? So within these last 2 years, especially, I started delving into more linked artworks at first, and then I realized, hey, what if we continue the story, right? Because initially there was no story, and all the story there is the artworks themselves. So yeah, so in a sense, that is kind of the main change that happened, right? I got a bit more proficient at the basics of the technical side of drawing, so I wanted to explore the storytelling side a bit more. And as I mentioned, right, I was really impressed by all these stories that I saw, and I was like, okay, I wanted to, give my attempt at trying to do something like that. So this was kind of like the change in motivation, you would say. I would say that it's like the biggest change in the past 2 years.
Definitely, yeah. I think some artists try to achieve everything at once, storytelling, technical, but you kind of took your time to, get the technical sides down, and then you realize, oh no, now I want to move on to story. And
Yeah,
it's just like a gradual
yeah,
process for you, and it's really
yeah.
insightful.
And I think it's also really lucky as well, right? Because when I was doing more of the technical things, it never crossed my mind to try and do more narrative based stuff, because it just felt like a different world, right? It's like, there's no way I can draw these linked illustrations with so many different angles. I'll stick with my portraits and simple stuff last time, right? But as you get a bit better at it, you kind of want to challenge yourself a bit more. Yeah, and oh yeah, and there's one more thing that I would like to add on, right? In terms of personal life, something did change, or rather, something
Okay.
gradually changed, right? So, I don't want to be like, hey, I'm an old man here, because
No.
I want to be honest, but as we all get older, even from transitioning from the teens to your 20s to your very early 30s, I think there is a process where your physical can't quite keep up with what you might want to do. In a sense, I think that is really true, right? Because man, teenagers are really just they have
Energetic
infinite
and
energy. They
everything.
have
Yeah.
infinite energy. It's like, sleep at 2 a.m. No problem.
No problems.
Now, so that's a change I really want to kind of uh, remind myself of, because nowadays, I'm again, right, I'm not old or unfit or anything, but it's just that I feel like nowadays I want to make sure that I go to bed by like 11:30 at the latest at night. Yeah, and try not to exceed that, right? Because I want to give myself a break, and I think it's important for me to kind of highlight it as well, in conjunction with all like the intense stuff, like, oh, this is how you do a narrative, this is how you do a story, and all these things. I think I also want to share that I also found it and discovered that how important it is to go and rest, go and have a good night's sleep, and yeah, take care of your own body.
Yeah, I agree. We all have to remind ourselves to stretch, rest, sleep. It's we just have to keep our bodies healthy and strong if we want to continue doing this for a longer period of time. I do agree. Thank you for
Yeah, and it's
pointing that out.
surprising, right? Like, you would think that when we are doing something we don't want to do, we just constantly want to rest.
Yeah,
But
then when we're doing
with something
something
you
we
want to
love,
do,
we forget to rest.
suddenly it's the opposite, right? You
Yeah.
don't rest until you get sick, and then
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
horrible. Yeah, so that's definitely a challenge as well.
Thank you for pointing that out. On the like topic of advice, I'd like to ask, what advice would you like to give to young and aspiring beginner artists?
Again, right, I usually try to avoid being, authoritative or instructional, because there's a lot of things I'm also learning myself, right? So I don't want to, slap a
Yeah.
seal of authority on anything I really say, especially something as important as advice, right? Because I think people listening, they might be like, okay, he said this, so, I gotta do it. So this is really my kind of disclaimer. The thing about being an artist is that you can be yourself for a very, very big part of it. It's about how you want to approach it. So for younger artists out there, I think it can feel really daunting, right? Because when I just started, there was pretty much just DeviantArt being like the main hub of
Yeah.
like for amateur artists and all that. And nowadays it's wild, right? There's everything.
Yeah.
Do you need to get into TikTok? Do you need to get into like 10 different platforms
Yeah.
to present your art? How am I supposed to fight the algorithm? All these
Oh,
kind of things
yes.
are so horrendous. Like even as someone who has done it for quite a while, sometimes it still can get on my nerves a bit. So I imagine it's really tough for new artists to kind of get a handle on these kind of things. So I think my recommendation from my own experience is to try your best to focus on your own art, because in a sense, despite how harsh these algorithms can be, from what I've seen, I think even then, right, the human factor behind all the people who see your art, right, see your work, see your sweat and tears through these platforms, I think there is a very organic sense of acknowledgement there that I have felt over the years, right? Because
Yeah.
as newer artists, sometimes you can feel like, oh, I'm not getting enough likes. How many likes do I need to make it into a career? And all these kind of things are things that you inevitably think about, right? And I think even when I was really early on DeviantArt, I thought about that a lot. It's kind of like, okay, the last post got 38 likes. Okay, so the next one's got to get like at least 45. Or, I'm doing something wrong. And in a sense, it's natural to want to progress and be acknowledged for your efforts. But I think what I was able to sort of do was to still try my best, in a sense, to have this feeling at the back of my head to be like, okay, there's this pressure of doing this, there's a pressure of kind of making your time worthwhile, right? You don't want your art to
Yeah.
not be seen. I think that's really important, right? You don't want your art to be not be seen. So there is a pressure of that. But I think what I was really trying to say is that, in a sense, social media can seem really mean and kind of unforgiving, but do realize that there are people out there, there are real people out there who see it, right? And then this book can, and turning things back a bit, this book is only possible because of all these actual people who have seen my art.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I want you to know that as you put out your work and as you improve and put your energies into developing your own craft, there are real people out there who see it. And I think it's really good to take heart in that. And that as you grow, right, your audience will grow as well. So I think there is a specific certainty in that truth, right? I think can be heartening, especially to newer artists who may feel overwhelmed. So I would say, again, to recap everything, don't worry too much about all the platforms and stuff. Do what you need to do, put up platforms as you need to, and just focus on your art, right? How can you make your art better? What do you enjoy about doing art, right? And then follow what you enjoy, and just try your best. And I think it's almost certain that you'll very much be rewarded for your efforts. So keep heart, enjoy what you do, and don't give up. So I think that is this kind of generic, but I think this is kind of my message as well, right?
No, I fully agree. And some people need to be reminded, Sometimes we, like you said, get lost in the numbers, the number of likes. And, sometimes we just need to be reminded that it's not all about the numbers. Because think about it, right? I heard somewhere where, like, they said, you just get 10 likes on Instagram and you're sad. But imagine if you're drawing and 10 people walk up to you and like, hey, that's a nice drawing. Like, it's going to make your day. You're going to be so happy. You're like, 10 people just in one day, But like on Instagram, we just think, oh no, just 10 likes, So I think, it's really like, it's a reminder. And I think it was really helpful. And like, yeah, I don't think it was cliche at all. No.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, right? Because I think in general, people, humans in general, just take positive reinforcement very lightly, but they take negative feedback really
Yeah.
strongly, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes even just a couple of fewer likes can be a negative statement. So it's a thing that we need to manage as well. I completely agree with that, right? It's something that's not necessarily easy, but I think again, right? I feel like if you let your art speak for itself, you'll definitely head in the right direction. Because
Definitely.
firstly, you're doing something you love, and yeah, I think that's the most important thing, right? You just do something you enjoy. No matter how it turns out, you still had a great time. It's not something you'll ever regret. So it's really just, always going back to the art itself, I would say.
Definitely, I agree fully. Okay, guys. I would just like to round up this interview with one last question. I would personally, this is always a question I ask artists that I interview because I just love knowing about the process, the behind the scenes. I'm just nosy like that. So don't mind me. But I would like to know, what were your highest moments when making the second book, especially, trying to, you've made your first book before, so you kind of like had some experience, but what were your high moments with this second book? And also the low moments, and how were you able to pull yourself out of that low moment? So yeah.
So this being the second book, I had a bit of benefit of experience, right, from the first book. So I wouldn't say anything has gotten, too tough or nightmarish. So I'll start with the highest moments, right? I think the fact that 3D Total reached out for the second book, I think that was definitely the kind of highest moment, because it wasn't something I expected. I didn't take for granted that they'll reach out again. So I would say, to be really honest with you, that was the highest moment. Like, oh wow, this is a huge opportunity once again. So right, I think in a sense emotionally that was the highest moment. Of course, in the process of making the book, right, to answer your question exactly, I feel like it's being able to express my thoughts in a way that is as coherent as I can make them, right?
Yeah.
Because if you ask my editor on the book, I believe she is the main editor for this specific book, The World of Guweiz. She'll tell that I have edited the text quite a few times since finishing it. So it's really the highest moment, right? Was finally wrapping up each chapter and reading it through one more time, and it's okay, this is what I wanted to say, and I think I said it reasonably well. So that is really a feel good moment, because for the artworks, right, a feel good moment is long ago when I finished them, and maybe there's a bit of anticipation for the remaster, but the text, right, or the thoughts, the words, the intent behind the book itself is the first time that I'm putting it together. So that is definitely the highest moment for me. For the lowest moment, I wouldn't say there's a moment where I felt terrible making the book, because after all, it's just a great opportunity, right? And it wasn't as if I was forced into this by any means. So I feel like it wouldn't quite be reasonable to call it, low in a sense that it's bad. But I definitely had some moments where it was a little bit tight on timeline in a sense, because there was just so much I wanted to do, right? If you gave me an opportunity, I would keep revising the text over and over again for like the next few months. So, time constraints being a reality, and a very reasonable reality, a low moment would be perhaps not being able to spend more time, refining it and making it better. And, the scheduling, having national service, a reservist, period, right after my time working on the book, it cut a little bit into the personal art, but then again, right, it's for a really good reason. So, I have no regrets on that end at all. So yeah,
Yeah.
overall a really positive experience for me. Definitely no complaints from me. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome to hear. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank you
enjoyed
as
this
well. Thank you
interview.
very
I'm
much,
sure
Nettie, for
everyone.
interview.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
thank you
course.
so much as
Of
well.
course.
Yeah.
I'm sure the people listening to this interview, they're probably taking something away from this. They're probably so excited to finally, you know, get more insight from, the amazing. Yes. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. I am really looking forward to having your second book on my shelf to add to my collection. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
And
much for your time as well.
definitely, definitely. Okay, thank you so much.